So thank you again for the opportunity to all of you to have a chance to speak with you about China this evening. Thank you as well to our great partner at GatewayBaltic for accommodating us and giving us the opportunity to speak with you as well. My hope for tonight's presentation is that over the next 20 minutes together, you will walk away from this presentation with a much better sense for China as a market, for opportunities potentially available to you and your country, and perhaps a better sense for how best to approach some of those opportunities. Now, China is a very interesting topic to talk about, so I'm kind of lucky in that way. It's always quite fun to share insights about the Chinese market with people from other places. If I could just very briefly start to get a sense for you here. How many of you have actually traveled to China? If I could just get a quick raise of hands. Okay, great. And how many of you are currently doing business in some way, shape, way, or form, either buying or procuring from China or selling into China? So, two gentlemen. Oh, okay, good. Looks like about maybe 15-20% of the room. Good. So maybe in a year from now, if we ask the same question, perhaps there will be many more hands showing up. All right, so without further ado, I will jump into our presentation. And what I'd like to do is to just start by giving you a brief sense for GIA China capabilities. So at the moment, we have two offices in Greater China, one of which is in Hong Kong, where I used to be based, and one office in Shanghai, where I'm now based. And this is the office that I help to run. We have at the moment 16 analysts, researchers, and consultants in our Shanghai office. And we focus on markets throughout the world, very heavily on Asia Pacific, and on China, of course, on behalf of our clients. We also work with a network of over 250 consultants, which are located throughout 32 provinces in China. And they help us in various ways with our research, analysis, and so on and so forth. All right, so jumping in. What I thought would be interesting to do would be to start with some fast facts. So as you all very likely know, the population in China is 1.32 billion. Let me just quickly quiz you here. Who here knows what the largest city in Shanghai would be? Who wants to venture a guess? Oh, pardon me. Whoops. That wasn't proper. Let me rephrase that. The largest city in China. There you go. How about the largest country in China? That would be. Okay. Largest city in China. Who would like to venture a guess?
Guangzhou.
Guangzhou, good guess. Other guesses? Other guesses?
Hong Kong.
Hong Kong, good guess. Another one? Ah, you got it. Very good. Chongqing, excellent. So Chongqing, very few people actually know this. I myself actually was very amazed when I first learned this. Chongqing is a city in the western part of China with 28 million people. Which is pretty stunning. Shanghai is actually really the second largest city, and of course the major business center in China. There are over 120 cities in China. Let me see if I can use this clicker here. 120 cities in China with over 1 million people. 32 provinces, 5 of which have a population of over 50 million, which is pretty stunning. Actually, I myself am from Canada. When I think that one province is almost twice as many we have in all of Canada, that really blows me away, frankly. Total population, urban population of 540 million, which is dramatically up from about 170 million in 1978. That's one of the mega trends that we've seen in China over the past 20 plus years. There's a huge migration of people from rural areas into urban, into major cities. So as the economy shifts into a much more much less agrarian economy, we're seeing a major shift of population as well. It is the third largest country in the world, following Russia and Canada in terms of space. Another very interesting fact, which I always think is very interesting, is China has more English speakers than the United States itself. Kind of amazing when you think about it. Okay, it is the second largest manufacturer in the world, still expected to surpass the United States very likely in 2011. And the United States is still the largest manufacturer in the world as of today. And there are 450,000 millionaires in China, which ranks it 5th globally. This is another interesting one. GDP growth, as you all know, and you probably read in the papers very, very regularly and hear on the news, has been tremendous. Just this year, China became the second largest economy by GDP in the world, followed by the United States with about 13 trillion. China now has close to 6 trillion. The growth rate in China has actually been, the laser pointer? Good. Has been pretty astounding since 1978, and only in a couple of years has the growth rate actually fallen just about 3.9%. And for the bulk of the years, growth has been above 8%. That's a pretty staggering track record considering the size of this country. So one way to look at things. Growth in future years, of course, is unknown, but expected to remain above 8 or 9% for the next couple of years, putting the country in an incredible trajectory. The structure of the economy has been changing very substantially over the past 20 years. If you look at 1979, the country was very, very heavily based on an agrarian economy, on the primary industries, so mining, agriculture, et cetera, and a major structural change now through 2009, where only 10.3%, looking at the red part of the stack chart here, is actually comprises the industry, the overall economy. So the major change has really been the tertiary industry, which in 1979 represented only about 22% of the economy, and has now grown very substantially to almost 44%. And this is something the Chinese government is very, very keen to do, is to continue to build the tertiary industry, services, sophisticated offerings, and so on and so forth. Looking at foreign direct investment, so this has been a major driver of growth in China. So it's up 41% versus 2005. Total FDI was $90 billion in 2009, expected to continue growing substantially. Over 480 of the world's 500 Fortune 500 companies now have a presence and are very, very active in China, most of which are in manufacturing and in real estate. About 70% of these companies are involved in manufacturing and real estate as of today. The country very broadly can be divided and is often sort of divided into these 4 key areas. And about 90% of all of the economic activity in China is actually taking place in the green, purple, and red areas, so the very coastal areas. The inside of the country, the central and western part of the country, is very underdeveloped. A lot of it is desert. Chongqing is located somewhere in here, and very, very underdeveloped, and the government is very keen to start developing the western part of the country. So in the years to come, you'll likely hear more and more about economic, industrial, and other developments in this part of China. So again, the country is comprised of 32 provinces, 5 autonomous regions, 2 special administrative regions, Macau, which of course is like the Las Vegas of Asia, and Hong Kong, of course. There's a lot more to say, but I think given we only have about 20 minutes together, I'll move forward from here. Okay, I thought I'd talk to you a little bit about the consumer market, since it's such a powerful engine now in terms of the global economic activity that we're now seeing everywhere. China is the most rapidly growing consumer market in the world. Consumption currently, retail consumption only accounts for 4% at the moment globally, but it's growing at 20+% actually, which or accounts rather for 20% of global growth, which is pretty astounding. To give you a sense for how far China still has to go in terms of its growth and development, in the United States, 70% of consumer spending, consumer spending accounts for 70% of U.S. GDP, 60% of Indian GDP, but only around 40% of Chinese GDP. So if we were to see a shift in consumer spending and activity to be on par with India or the United States or Europe, for example, that would mean tremendous structural change in terms of the overall retail industry in China. Okay, Chinese consumers are changing very, very rapidly. We all know that China was a former communist country, a very closed economy, based on very Confucian values. The economy is very, very rapidly shifting towards a much more sophisticated base of consumers. The market, as I'll get into in a moment, is very, very segmented. This is by no means one homogeneous market. It's an extremely homogeneous market in many, many regards. There is a very strong thirst for Western lifestyles and luxuries. It's a very aspirational population and consumer, which is a very important thing to understand. And they tend to be very economically minded and driven. So to give you a sense, actually, in the 1970s, one of my staff, actually one of my team members, told me a very interesting story. When her parents got married, her parents or her grandparents had given her parents 4 gifts. They offered her a sewing machine, a radio, a bicycle, and a watch. And those were seen as the indispensable items back in the 70s for any newly married couple to have, which is very, very interesting when you actually compare how far things have come. In the 1980s, the focus was on the goods that were, say, 1,000 renminbi and above, so white goods, consumer appliances, and so forth. And since the 1990s, the Chinese consumers evolved very rapidly, consuming now many, many luxury goods, expensive luxury apartments, and other expensive items. So there's been just a massive transformation in consumer patterns and interests in the past 30 years. As I said earlier, there are tremendous differences in terms of consumers, in different parts of China. This is driven by different economic factors, income levels, level of economic development, as well as a series of non-economic factors. And understanding the consumer mindset across different markets in China is extremely important. They're very, very different in the East than they are in the West, for example. This is one, I'll go through this fairly quickly again in the interest of time, but what I really wanted to impart to you was, again, this is just one way of mapping the consumers, the population in these various cities, but if you were to kind of look at them from traditional versus, say, trendy and very progressive type consumers, and hardworking and frugal versus pursuit of leisure on the other axis, you can see tremendous differences in terms of how the consumers in various cities tend to be positioned. So it's very, very important to deal clearly with each one of these markets very individually. But on the whole, there's a very, very strong shift towards increasing consumerism right across the country. I'm speaking fairly quickly, guys. I've got a bad habit of doing that. Am I speaking too quickly? You guys are getting me, yeah? No problem? Wonderful. Lots of shaking heads. That's cool. All right. Good. I'm going to skip through these 3 slides. China organizes, there are hundreds of cities across many different tiers, so 5 tiers in particular. The first and second tiers tend to be the very largest cities. Now, one of the very interesting things, we often hear about China having $6 trillion economy, second largest in the world, but breaking things down in a little bit more detail, I think is extraordinarily insightful. If you look at the Tier 1 and Tier 2 cities, again being the very largest cities, you can see that only 6% of the population in these cities, so Shanghai, Beijing, Guangzhou, Chongqing, etc., actually make more than 522 euros per month, which I think is quite interesting, only 6%. When you move to smaller cities, 3rd, 4th, and 15th tier cities, you've actually got 70 to 80% of the population which is making less than 156 euros per month. So this is the vast